What'd you think? You saw that exterior. It's undeniably Porsche. There's no doubt. The front end, the roof line, the rear end. And this was by design. Porsche had to take the MLB architecture, which is part of VW Group, and make some changes. Specifically, this whole section, the upper end. They chopped the top. And they chopped the top to lower the roof line down, to give it more of a car look. The hood design, specifically, is a clamshell. And that is pretty much hand done on every single car because of the complex shape and nature of it. And when you get to the interior space, and that's the big thing, we can look at the exterior all day long. This is where things get a little bit different. And depending on your trim level, it's going to look vastly different. I talked about this with Jack. The higher you go in price, the more leather you get. But in this, around $75,000, you get kind of the rubber, typical vinyl-ish textures that you would see on most normal cars. And it's most noticeable in the entire door card. In fact, if I didn't tell you this was a Porsche and I filmed the side of this door as you're looking at, you would think you were in like a Jetta or a Golf product. And that's because they're sharing resources from VW and Audi. So some of that is a carryover, but they do some things special here. So let's get into that. All right. Porsche interiors. There's no doubt that when you get in here for the first time, this is a last generation product because it is littered with knobs, buttons, and switches everywhere. It is so cluttered that I feel like I'm in my grandmother's basement and she hasn't thrown anything out in about 40 years. And that, again, is a first impression. Once you get in here and understand the methodology behind all this, it makes a lot more sense in terms of how everything's used. And I'm one of the biggest complainers about how companies are starting to remove physical buttons and putting them on touchscreens. And you don't have to worry about that here. That's for damn sure. So this is the other extreme, right? So you buy this, you get used to it, you know where everything's at, and then it becomes more comfortable. I think they could have done a better job integrating all this, but that's my opinion. Now, there are some other strange things, like the steering wheel heater button is like buried in the spindle at the lower part of the steering wheel. You don't even know it's there. It's not even labeled. The steering wheel adjuster is this digital switch at the bottom that feels like a mechanical lever. And at first, because there's some delay when you touch it, it doesn't adjust right away. I actually tried to pull it down. I'm like, oh my God, I'm lucky I didn't break it. But everything else is basic. You're going to get in here, like the shifter isn't like weird. It's your traditional down all the way to drive, all the way up is park. I think most people are going to get in here and get comfortable with it once they understand how it's done. Now, in terms of the refresh stuff, and you want to talk about that, they've added the driver select mode to the steering wheel, which is like what you find on their other sports cars. So you can select through a rotary dial, Sport, Sport Plus, and Individual. And then they also add the Sport Response button in the middle, which gives you instantaneous thrust for about 20 seconds. Now, the infotainment has also been updated, and this is a big highlight because, I've talked about some of the negatives, but I love the fact that the infotainment screen is integrated into the dash in a widescreen layout. The other part is the screen technology they're using has superb black levels and contrast. So when you look at this at night, it doesn't blind you. You can literally leave the screen on without turning it off. The other thing that they've done is they're allowing you the use of tiles on the home screen. And the tiles are all customizable. You can have news, you can have like basically widgets. And to me, it reminds me of the old Microsoft kind of Surface or the Microsoft Windows 8 layout with the tiles. But it's not as like weird and cumbersome as that because the tiles are not animated. But again, you can strip this down to basically nothing. Now, of course, you can leave certain things here. Like I would love to leave the clock and date widget or the widget for adjusting your track or pausing it for XM or Bluetooth. Then get rid of the news and the rest. But you can do that. You can do it however you want. There's a three bar drop down that allows you to basically configure every menu or sub menu based on where you're at. So if you hit that, like on the case of the home screen, you can configure widgets. And this allows you to kind of drag and drop, change the layout you want, or just change categories. They have it pretty well done here, I think, for a user interface. It's simple to use, and once you get it the way you want it, you're not going to mess with it anyway. Now, we talked a lot about the front compartment. The back seats are pretty important for a vehicle like this, otherwise why would you buy it? And it is very usable. The rear cup holder space is enormous. The seat is right now in my driving position. I'm 5'9", and I fit pretty well. These seats are very comfortable and pliable. You have a temperature control back here, rocker and vents, along with seat heaters and USB ports to charge your phone. So it is a very usable rear seat space. Now the negative part is the seats don't recline and they feel very upright. But again, you can't do everything in a vehicle like this. They're trying to keep the dimensions a little bit smaller. Obviously you would fit a child seat back here. You could do that. And the absolute biggest pro of this interior space, it is unbelievably quiet. And the level of comfort and just, you don't get any fatigue from sitting in here. There's no weird road noise. There's no strange jarring or bumps, namely in the back seat. A lot of cars suffer in the back seat. Your passengers in the back are always going to feel good, and you can ride in here for long periods of time despite its dimensions being a bit smaller. But the biggest selling point is the hatch. Let's take a look at that. Come here! Thing just does what it wants to do. The width and the depth is amazing in here, and I'm not kidding. And I can totally forgive the rear seat room being a little bit compromised. They got to try to do a lot of things. I can fit the e-scooter in like this sideways. That's how much width there is. And you're like, Ted, it's hanging out the back. Well, don't worry about that because the seats do fold down. They fold down and this turns into an enormous space. It really does. And I'm not even joking around about it. So you can really use this and still have all the things that you want from kind of a fun, sporty, whatever you want to call it. And you even have a center pass through for your skis when I go to Aspen. Now this also has buttons if you have the air suspension. You can raise and lower the rear with these two buttons here on the side, which again, if you're shorter, it's really nice because it lowers the load floor. But anyway, let's just get this in the shop and talk turkey. We are in the shop with the Macan S on the lift.
This is a refreshed Macan S. Got refreshed in 2019 and they did some various bits and bobs to keep it fresh.
Yes, and the new one is being developed right now. But the benefit of us covering this is we can talk about what they've done here and what they're going to do in the future. So let's get right into it. This is a very, very important vehicle for Porsche. And we talk about this a lot with manufacturers. You wonder why and how. But in terms of the underbody, this is part of the VW Group MLB architecture, which is modular and longitudinal.
And that's really the elephant in the room.
Yes, and people are like, oh, it's just a rebadged Q5. Why would they just take what they had? It's not a real Porsche. And as we go over this, you're going to see not only how much time they spent on changing things, just how good the MLB architecture is, why you would do it, and what the purpose of this vehicle is. So underneath, a lot of the good things that you see in Audi VW products are all the existing covers, panels, NVH design, airflow considerations like the front bumper, the air spats in the front and along the wheels to flow air. You have directional airflow and vanes on the brake system or control arms to direct air into the dust shields or behind the dust shields to cool the brakes. Porsche has told me that about 70% of this car has been changed or modified for Porsche's purposes compared to the traditional MLB architecture. So that gives it more of their own character and kind of their own personality based on their development goals.
However, the hard points, specifically the control arms, are identical to what you find on the Q5 and the SQ5. They look identical. I'm sure the parts, as you can see, even have the Audi stamps. But that being said, Porsche says there are 3 different chassis designs. You have a coil spring car with non-adaptive dampers. You have PASM with coil springs, and then Air Ride with PASM, which is the adaptive dampers once again. It is dramatically different than the Q5, and it feels very impressive.
It does. I've driven the Q5. I've driven the Q5S in a short period of time. This does not feel like that at all. So let's get into some of the suspension bits and pieces. Yes, they're reusing a lot of components because that's the whole point of a modular architecture is that you save cost in design, you save the money where you don't have to redevelop everything that's already great. And what's great about it? Well, the subframe carrier is all aluminum. Both lower control arms are aluminum. The upright, the shock fork, the upper A-arms are aluminum. And when you look at this entire structure, it's kind of a hybrid double wishbone to multi-link front. So you can do all the kinematic things that you want to do to change toe angle under load, under compression, lateral load. I mean, this is a very advanced suspension that Porsche doesn't particularly need to change all that much to begin with. So what they've done is modified spring rates, dampers, the ARBs or anti-roll bars, the braking system, which is very important to Porsche, is completely altered. Because Porsche's vision is, look, we want extreme brake feel. We want hard stopping power, and they value that over kind of that quiet, squeaky free brake pedal feel. You're going to get more dusting, you're going to get more squeak, and that's by design, so you have the ultimate braking force. And this is the steel rotor option, which is exactly how you should option it. They have a carbon ceramic version, which frankly might last longer, but the cost is just not worth it.
I mean, it's astronomical.
It is.
They did do some changes for 19. As you mentioned, the lower control arms are now aluminum. That was done for this mid-cycle refresh. They also redid the shock absorbers. The sway bars are now even bigger than they used to be. So this car, when it first came out, had a tendency to understeer. Not that anyone's really tracking a Macan, but they attempted to neutralize that. And this car does feel rear-driven. In
the back of the Macan, we need to bring this up because I didn't talk about it in the front. It's important. While this is a shared platform with other vehicles in the VW universe, this is made in one of Porsche's own factories in Germany, which means it is subjected to their stringent quality control and their specific methodologies on how they build this. So you're not going to get a vehicle that comes out of there that has an insane panel gap on one side and the other side is super tight. And that's why you're paying more money for a Porsche product, because there is that attention to detail there. Now, that's not to say they're not going to have some issues. It's still mass produced. You know, this is still a mass production car. But when you look at the factory, as we've showed you some of this, it's very impressive what they're able to do.
It does look like they'll shoot their employees at dawn if they make a mistake, though. I mean,
no, it's true. That's part of this product and the way that their mentality is. They're a very serious, very engineered, focused company.
It's not a value brand. It's a brand that basically its pinnacle is quality and engineering.
Yes, you're not going to go in and be like, oh, hey, can I get everything?
A 2 for 1?
Oh, yeah, 2 for 1. You know, it's just not like that. So if you know that going in, you know what to expect. But in the back, there's something more specific to Porsche here, and that is the all-wheel drive system.
Despite it being on a shared platform as the Q5, both the all-wheel drive system, the tuning associated with it, and obviously the transmission are entirely unique to this car, as well as the stability control. So this car has Sport Chrono, which also changes the stability control parameters, but unlike most SUVs where the drive mode is directly tied to the way that the stability control works, it's not that way in this car. So if you're in normal mode, you can go full off. And that's another thing that's unique to the Macan.
Yeah, and that's part of what you're buying into. Yes, it's a CUV or an SUV or whatever you want to call it, but it still has a lot of the things that Porsche does well baked into this. So if you're a Porsche fanatic or you're somebody that is really focused on driving, little things like this, the exhaust tuning, the suspension setup is very, very unique compared to basically any other vehicle you're going to drive in this type of segment. But let's take a look under the hood, Jack. We're under the hood. Let's talk about this briefly, Jack. What do we got?
So this is Porsche's corporate Hot V setup V6. It's a 3-liter. It's a single turbo, which is a twin scroll that's located in the center of the V for better responsiveness. It is the same V6 you find in both the Cayenne and the Panamera.
And this feels amazing in large part because of the PDK, or the dual clutch automated manual that's in here.
It's been revised for the refresh, but the real change they made that you'll notice is it now has a coasting mode. So it'll allow the car to obtain better fuel economy. That's the only reason they did it.
Okay. Other than that, what you're going to notice under here is much like the MLB platform, they had to make some serious modifications to this to basically stand under the umbrella that we're sitting under right now. This clamshell hood is all hand finished. It is a complicated shape and design, in large part because of the integrated ductwork that is built into the shape or shell of this that allows it to be integrated into the airbox. So the hood is basically part of the intake system. That allows for obviously cooler air, freer flowing air, and just it looks pretty badass. Honestly, it's a really neat design.
I'm sure this hood costs more than both of us combined.
I bet you it costs more than probably some of the cars I've owned. I'd hate to see. We should probably find out what the price is. But yeah, I mean, it's labor intensive to make, to do, design, but it's also why the front half of this car looks pretty uniquely Porsche.
The other thing to bring up is the air flow from the grille itself. It is unique to this car. Now, it's not found on the Q5 or the Q5 or SQ5, and it's active, meaning it has active grills.
But speaking of that, let's get this out on the road and see how it drives. Here we go, Jack. Porsche Macan S, Sport Response, Sport Plus, let's launch her.
All right.
Holy shit! That was violent, bro.
Well, you got Sport Chrono with launch control.
Wow. No, that really caught me off guard. After our first couple launch attempts, this motor in combination with this is so impressive.
You're also talking to the ultimate Porsche fanboy. You could literally put a Porsche badge on a dumpster. And I would tell you about the dumpster's racing pedigree.
Yeah.
I mean, based on our last experience with the Porsche product, the Carrera T, I basically called that car a scaled down version of God.
Yeah.
But when I got into this, I had to change my perception around. I'm going to be honest. When I first knew we were getting the Macan, and I didn't know anything about it, I thought of this car as a cash grab. But after spending time in it and realizing it's not really a sports car, I'm really impressed.
So let's talk about that, right? Because people are going to be like, well, the biggest thing that I constantly see is, well, when you share an architecture with other cars, you water it down instantaneously. So that's kind of what I expected it to feel like the other MLB vehicles, and it doesn't feel like that at all. It really doesn't.
Were you expecting what I was expecting, like a Q5 with like Audi scratched out and Porsche put on?
Yeah, so the big pros here is, one, this is the perfect amount of horsepower, and for a vehicle like this, the single turbo unit is very, very strong, and it still feels somewhat naturally aspirated.
And it's unique to this car.
It is. It's unique to this, and it makes it feel special. Combine that with a dual clutch, a real dual clutch, that is programmed as about as good as you could possibly do it. The shifts are razor sharp. Its ability to downshift, upshift, and change its personality based on your driving modes. You can go to full shock like we did when we launched it, where your head snaps, or you can put it in a casual mode where it feels more like a traditional automatic, but you always have the response from it.
It's about as good as you could want in a compromised SUV.
Yes. So let's talk about that. When you're trying to build this sports car into these SUVs, you're immediately starting from a bad spot because it's higher up. You're losing the low center of gravity. You're getting more float. You're having to create ground clearance. It's just counterintuitive from an engineering perspective. But I will say this: the suspension with the air ride in here with air springs, this is absolutely a textbook example. If you're a manufacturer, anybody that wants to feel what an almost perfectly refined suspension is for the street, this is one of the best cars I've ever been in terms of ride quality. And it does it in a regular mode, and when you go to full Sport Plus, or when you change the suspension to full hard, there is never a time where you get any type of over-dampened feel. You don't get any springiness to the ride. You don't get any sudden impacts. Nothing like that happens with this. And it still maintains this firmness and compliance without, if you hit a bump over here, it doesn't transmit this springboard rubber bandy effect to this side through the seat. It's completely isolated on every single corner, and I can't tell you how impressed I am with the way that this car ride is. It's one of the biggest highlights of it, along with the quietness of it. It's really incredible.
It's an extremely impressive street car.
Let's launch this one more time. Sport response. Like I said, this is about the perfect amount of speed for the street. It really is. And I think, once you start to build up and get into the higher RPMs or the higher gears, it's not like crazy, insanely fast.
This is not a track hawk.
No, it's not like a track hawk or anything like that, but they have it tuned so smooth. The engine performance is so smooth in here. There's no weirdness. Like, we get on a lot of these turbocharged cars, and I'm like, I can't stand them. There's so much, you feel power getting cut, you feel strangeness in transmission performance, engine performance. You don't have any of that here. And with the all-wheel drive system, there's never a point where I feel like this thing is gonna get out of control. It really doesn't.
This is not a sports car, and I can't highlight that enough. If you're getting into this thinking it's gonna be a 911, it's not. But as a daily driven car, I drove this in really bad weather. I mean, this has got snow tires on it, but for some of the places I shot some of the footage, I drove it basically into a soybean field. And this thing is amazing in bad weather. It is very comfortable in the street. It's very quiet. It rides well. My only complaint with it really is its size.
Yeah.
It is, because of the way it looks, because you want a smaller SUV, it does not have the cargo capacity of a lot of the other cars in this segment.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit on the interior section. You have to compromise something. They cut the roof line down to give it just a more sporty appearance and, less drag. And you do compromise some parts. It's not a big vehicle to begin with. So they're trying to find the balance of what people really want. And the big thing is, this is the best-selling Porsche product. So clearly people are connecting with the fact that they don't need a monstrosity of a vehicle. You still get a hatch. You still get some back seat room where you can put smaller people or kids in, and it becomes a usable car with a lot of the functionality of like a lower end 911. It still has a lot of the same DNA or characteristics of driving, and it doesn't feel like a cookie cutter cardboard type CUV. And that's the thing, it does have personality that they baked in from all of their years of suspension tuning and engine tuning. It's all here. It's just in a weird package that is very strange. If you're coming from sports cars, it's hard to take this seriously, but it's very serious.
But as an SUV or a CUV, it's about as close as you can get to a well-balanced, let's say, a sports sedan.
Agreed. And I think that's a really good place to head into the final thoughts, where I'm going to talk more about some of the negatives and the positives of this, including like the audio system and all of that. Final thoughts on the Porsche Macan S. Now you might be wondering, why not just do a video on a GT3 RS? Well, the numbers don't lie. Porsche sells more Macans than any other product in their lineup. It's indicative of what people want. They want practical, they want usable, and the other vehicles, well, they're aspirational. You buy it, you save up for it, and you drive it on the weekend and stuff it in a garage. It becomes a toy like this, just something for fun. The Macan is not aspirational, it's usable. If you have a small family or pets, you can tool around in this thing all day long, and you can use it every single day. The other part is, it's one of the best riding vehicles I've ever been in. If you get in this with the air suspension, it's kind of a benchmark that you look at other vehicles around this class and you think, why can't everybody else do it as well as Porsche does in terms of ride quality? I think they have a strong understanding of what a street car needs to be in terms of performance, fun, power output, and transmission performance. That's the huge highlight. Now the lowlights are the Bose audio that gets bundled in a lot of these just to be on dealer lots. It's kind of a letdown with how quiet the interior is. The Burmeister option would be a much better setup for what this car is trying to do. But at the end of the day, again, you got to get in this and see if it has enough space. And if you can get past that, it's going to be one of the funnest, best handling, and most enjoyable CUVs, SUVs on the market. So thanks for watching this. I'll see you next time.